Today, the President signed a proclamation invoking Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 to impose a 25% tariff on imports of automobiles and certain automobile parts, addressing a critical threat to the U.S. and national security. That's coming from a White House fact sheet they just released. So today, we're going to talk about what that means for those of you contemplating buying an imported car. And in my example, as always, will be the INEOS Grenadier or the Grenadier Quartermaster. Hi, it's Josh, and today's talk will be filled with facts that have been given so far, but I'm leaving the politics out of it because I want to focus on the impact to you as a consumer and leave the politics for discussing somewhere else. Same goes for comments, as talk about pricing and value all day long, but I'm not interested in moderating a political debate, and we'll remove any comments that attempt to take sides. So let's go on to the details. The 25% tariff will be applied to imported passenger vehicles, sedans, SUVs, crossovers, minivans, cargo vans, and light trucks, as well as key automobile parts, engines, transmissions, powertrain parts, and electrical components, with processes to expand tariffs on additional parts if necessary. A later clarification was issued that the 25% tariff will be appended onto the already existing 2.5% import tariff that already exists on most foreign automobiles, making the total tariff amount 27.5%. Importers of automobiles under the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement will be given the opportunity to certify their U.S. content, and systems will be implemented such that the 25% tariff will only apply to the value of their non-U.S. content. USMCA compliant automobile parts will remain tariff-free until the Secretary of Commerce, in consultation with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, establishes a process to apply tariffs to the non-U.S. content. Now, there's some historical precedents for tariffs, and like it or not, it is something that could really stick and become woven into the fabric of the auto industry, like many other taxes and tariffs that have come before it. So let's name a few. The Energy Tax Act of 1978 wanted to encourage the development of more fuel-efficient vehicles and established a gas guzzler tax that began in 1980 on cars that did not meet certain fuel economy. This whole thing was precipitated by the gas shortages, real or manufactured, that occurred in 1978, and those of you old enough certainly remember waiting in long lines to buy gas, and even the odd and even day rationing for buying gas. Anyway, the gas guzzler tax is still around, and that number is buried in on the window sticker of affected cars and included in the MSRP. Who was supposed to pay it? Well, it was a tax for the manufacturer who produced the gas-guzzling and non-fuel efficient car. However, they handily passed it on directly to the customer. I pulled up a copy of my Monroney label, which is also known as the window sticker, of my old Aston Martin, and I was charged a $2,100 gas guzzler tax that I hardly remember. But that's the beginning of my point. Taxes and tariffs eventually become part of the selling price, and manufacturers want to highlight that they're passing on the cost to you rather than have you think that they're charging X plus 25% for a vehicle. Fun fact about the gas guzzler tax is that when the Tax Act of 1978 was written, SUVs as we know them today did not yet exist, and light trucks were considered primarily used for business, and therefore all of them were excluded from the tax. This law has never been amended, so the gas guzzler tax to this day only applies to four-wheel motor vehicles weighing less than 6,000 pounds and does not apply to SUVs or light trucks, and is determined by the EPA calculation of miles per gallon in order to determine how much of that tax you'll pay. So that's why an INEOS Grenadier does not pay a gas guzzler tax, but an Aston Martin does. Anyway, let's move on to the next vehicle tax. Any guesses? Nope. Not sales tax, and that's one that they never include in the retail selling price. Nope, it's the luxury tax. The luxury tax, the one that they signed into law in 1991, and again applied to four-wheeled on-road vehicles weighing 6,000 pounds or less. It also included other luxury items like watches, furs, yachts, and private jets, and it was aimed at bringing the deficit down. However, for cars, this was a simple 10% tax applied to any car selling for more than $30,000. I'm sure some of you paid it over the years. This tax was around for 11 years and finally eliminated for cars in 2002. So, as you can see, the tariff isn't a new idea. I think we may be shaking our heads as to why now and if it makes sense. So let's look at the impact on INEOS Grenadier. First, remember that the tariff is charged to the importer and that the selling dealer is not the importer. The importer would be INEOS North America. They import the Grenadier, sell it to your dealership, who then sells it to you. And when trying to figure out the exact tariff amount cost, that gets a little fuzzy. And that's because we don't know exactly what INEOS North America pays INEOS Automotive Limited, its UK parent, for each Grenadier. But let's do some simple math. Let's say that INEOS North America buys cars from INEOS Automotive Limited for $50,000 per unit. I don't believe that's a true number, but it'll keep things simple. That would mean that the import tariff would be roughly 25% or 27.5% of that $50,000, or $12,500 to $13,750. So we'll stick with $12,500 for this example. And that brings their import unit cost up from $50,000 to $62,500. Now, assume that they pass that full tariff along to the selling dealership, who then passes that expense along to you, the buyer. And you should note that they may not fully pass along the entire tariff to the dealer or the customer, because sometimes absorbing it to soften the blow might keep it under a key price point. So they may pass a percentage of it, but not all of it. We still don't know. But you can clearly see that it's going to be a bump of $12,500 to a retail customer using this example. So even though these aren't real world numbers, you can see what the impact will be on pricing. Now, for the Quartermaster, it's not so clear just yet, or maybe it is, we just don't know. And that's because the Quartermaster already has a 25% import tariff on it from the old chicken tax of 1964 that's still in place on imported light-duty trucks. Now, the big question is, will they add another 25% tariff on a vehicle already having 25% tariff on it under a different law? That remains to be seen. But be sure to subscribe if you're not already, and I'll post an update when things become a little more clear. Now, you should note that the current pricing for the Quartermaster already has the chicken tax 25% tariff baked into the MSRP selling price. And of course, this only applies to the US. Even Canada gets a break on the Quartermaster. So what do you think? Would you still buy your Grenadier if it costs another 12 to 15 grand, or maybe even a little more? It certainly pushes the limits in my opinion, but this is not of their doing at INEOS or any other importing manufacturer who's trying to deliver a product to a U.S. consumer. I would not be surprised if we see Trial Masters and Field Masters appear for 2026 with a few less standard features that can then be purchased as options so that INEOS can try to keep their base MSRP number as low as possible. Not that that helped with the base station wagon that most serious buyers pass them up for Trial Masters and Field Masters because they want the addition of the key features. Yet this allows INEOS to tout that beginning $75,000 price rather than the $83,000 vehicle that most buyers are looking for. We already know that the 2025 models, which are just about to arrive to the US shores, are virtually identical to the 2024s. Does that notion of the added tariff make you want to grab one of those 2024s sitting on dealer lots? Will it push up the resale value of used Grenadiers, knowing that a new one is similarly equipped is now quite a bit more expensive? We'll all have to stay tuned in to find out. I'll be sure to post an update once I see more detail on actual impact. But for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.